A woman in a $4,000 Armani suit reached across the aisle and snatched the battered F-22 Raptor from Tyler
Dad,
Wade's
look!
small
My
hand.
jet is ready for
She
takeoff!
jammed it into
It
the
sure
seat
is,
pocket
buddy.
with
We're
enough
almost at
force
our
to
gate.
crack plastic.
Awesome!
Keep
Hey,
your
buddy,
cheap
you
little
okay?
toys to
He's
yourself.
fine, just leave him be.
The boy's
was just
eyes
checking.
went wide,
It's
then
fine.
wet. 7 years old and already too familiar with that particular brand of contempt. His father sat frozen in the middle seat, every muscle-locked hands gripping the armrests like he was pulling G's in a combat turn instead of sitting in business class at 35,000 feet. Marcus Wade hadn't moved that fast since the last time his life depended on it. Back when speed meant survival and hesitation meant body bags. Back when his call sign was Viper 1 and the closest thing to God he knew was the roar of twin Pratt and Whitney engines at full military power. That was 3 years ago. 3 years since he'd traded a flight suit for coveralls. 3 years since the last time anyone looked at him with anything resembling respect. What happened next would silence every passenger in that cabin. What happened after they landed would break the internet and remind Marcus Wade that some things never leave your blood no matter how hard you scrub. The day had started 31 hours earlier in a garage that smelled like burned oil and broken promises. Marcus slid out from under a 2015 Ford F-150 transmission fluid streaking his forearms, his back screaming from 12 straight hours on concrete. The shop radio played something country and forgettable. His boss Sullivan stood by the lift with a clipboard and the kind of tired eyes that came from 40 years in the same four walls. That's the Carter job done. Torque converter was shot like you said. Sullivan nodded, made a check mark. You got good instincts for this, Marcus. Real good. The compliment landed hollow. Marcus had instincts for reading air pressure differentials at Mach 1.8 and predicting missile lock based on radar warning receiver tone. Diagnosing a failing transmission was like using a scalpel to open a beer can. Thanks, Sully. You heading out? It's past 7. Got to pick up Tyler from Helen's. Drive to Arlington takes 45. Sullivan studied him the way mechanics study engines, looking for the thing that wasn't running right. You look like hell, son. When's the last time you slept a full night? Marcus wiped his hands on a rag that only spread the grease around. Sleep's overrated. So's a heart attack at 37. Go home. Get some rest before that trip tomorrow. The trip. Business class tickets to Washington that Helen had bought over his protests. Early birthday present for Tyler, she'd said, though the boy's birthday wasn't for another month. Marcus knew what it really was. Pity wrapped in kindness, wrapped in the kind of love that only comes from watching your daughter die and wanting desperately to ease the pain for whoever's left standing. He'd tried to refuse, tried to explain that business class was a waste, that he and Tyler would be fine in coach, that the money could go toward something useful. But Helen Morrison had looked at him with Rachel's eyes in an older face and said the words that made refusal impossible. Rachel would want him to remember one special trip. So Marcus swallowed his pride along with everything else he'd been swallowing for 3 years and accepted the tickets. Now he stood in Sullivan's auto repair at 7:18 on a Tuesday evening, bone-tired and oil-stained, with just enough time to shower pack and make the drive before Tyler's bedtime. See you Monday, Sully. Have a good trip, and Marcus. Sullivan's voice carried something that might have been concern or might have been respect. With Sully it was hard to tell. You're a good man. Don't forget that. Marcus drove through Fort Worth traffic with the windows down because the truck's AC had died 2 months back and repairs cost money he needed for Tyler's school supplies. The evening heat pressed against his skin like a physical thing. Radio stayed off. He'd learned to appreciate silence the way some men appreciate whiskey. His phone buzzed at a red light. Text from Helen. Tyler's ready, ate dinner, packed his bag. See you soon. 3 sentences. Efficient. That was Helen. Everything about her was efficient except grief, which she wore like a coat she couldn't take off even in summer. The light changed. Marcus drove. Helen's house sat in a neighborhood where people mowed their lawns and kept their opinions to themselves. Small ranch-style pale blue siding flower beds that Rachel used to tend before the world went sideways. Tyler burst out the front door before Marcus even cut the engine backpack bouncing against his shoulders, that damn toy jet clutched in his right hand like a talisman. Dad, Grandma said we get to fly on a big plane tomorrow. Marcus climbed out, caught his son in a one-armed hug. The boy smelled like Helen's laundry detergent and the green apple shampoo Rachel used to buy in bulk. That's right, bud, early flight, which means early bedtime tonight. Helen appeared in the doorway, silver hair pulled back, reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. She looked older every time Marcus saw her. Grief did that, wore people down from the inside out. Coffee's on if you want some for the drive back. Thanks, Helen. We should probably get going, though. It's a school night. She came down the steps, handed Marcus a travel mug that was already prepared exactly how he liked it. Black 1 sugar. Rachel must have told her years ago. The tickets are in the side pocket of Tyler's bag. Boarding passes, too. I checked you both in online. You didn't have to do all that. I wanted to. Her eyes held his for a moment, and Marcus saw the weight of every unsaid thing pressing against her composure. Have a safe trip, both of you. Tyler was already at the truck trying to open the door with his small hands full. Marcus took the backpack, tossed it in the back seat, lifted the boy into his booster. Buckle up. Dad, can I show you something cool I learned today? Sure thing. Tell me on the drive. They pulled away from the curb. In the rearview mirror, Helen stood in her driveway, hand raised in a wave that lasted until they turned the corner. Marcus wondered if she stood there long after, like she was waiting for someone else to come home. Tyler talked non-stop for the first 20 minutes. School stuff mostly. His friend Carlos got in trouble for bringing a lizard to class. Mrs. Patterson gave them homework on fractions. Recess got cut short because of rain. Normal kid stuff, the kind of stuff that made Marcus's chest tight because it was so beautifully, painfully ordinary. This was what he'd given up the speed and the sky for. This was the mission now, making sure Tyler had a childhood that included lizards and fractions and rain-shortened recess. Dad? Yeah, bud. Can I ask you something? Marcus glanced over. Tyler had that look, the one that meant a real question was coming. Not can I have ice cream, but something bigger. Shoot. Why do the other kids' dads pick them up in nice cars? The question hung in the cab of the truck like smoke. Marcus's hands tightened on the wheel. My truck runs fine. I know, but... Tyler's voice got smaller. Carson's dad has a new one, and Ethan's dad has one that talks. Talks? Like tells you where to go and stuff, with a screen. Marcus swallowed something that tasted like failure. Those cost a lot of money, Ty. More than we need to spend on something that just gets us from place to place. I know. The boy went quiet, then added, I don't care about the car, Dad. I was just wondering. But he did care. Of course he cared. He was 7, and kids that age noticed everything and understood just enough to know when they didn't measure up. Tyler, look at me for a sec. The boy turned. You know what matters? What? That I show up every day. I pick you up, I make your lunch, I help with your homework. That truck gets me to you. That's all it needs to do. Tyler nodded, processing. Then, Dad, your hands are dirty again. Marcus looked down at his knuckles, still stained despite 3 rounds of scrubbing with the heavy-duty soap. The grease lived in the creases of his skin like permanent marker. Comes with the job. Kids at school say... Tyler stopped. Say what? Nothing. Tyler. They say you're poor. That's why Mom left. The truck swerved slightly. Marcus corrected, pulled into a gas station parking lot, put it in park. His vision had gone narrow and bright around the edges. Mom didn't leave. You know that. I know. But they don't. And when I tell them she got sick, they look at me weird. Marcus unbuckled, turned to face his son fully. Tyler clutched the F-22 against his chest, that toy with the chipped paint and missing landing gear and piece of tape holding the left wing at the right angle. Rachel had given it to him 2 months before the end, before the hospital became their second home, before everything good got measured in hours instead of years. Listen to me. Those hands you're talking about, these dirty hands. Marcus held them up. These hands changed the oil in Mrs. Ramirez's car last week so she could drive to her treatments. These hands fixed Mr. Tron's transmission so he could get to work and feed his family. These hands packed your lunch this morning. These hands held your mom's hand in the hospital when nobody else could stay. Tyler's eyes went wide. These hands aren't dirty, son. They're proof that I showed up, and I'll keep showing up, every single day, for you. The boy reached out, took one of those oil-stained hands in both of his small, clean ones. They sat there in the parking lot of a gas station off Route 183, holding on to each other while the evening traffic hummed past. I love you, Dad. I love you too, bud. More than you know. They made it home by 8:30. Home was a 2-bedroom apartment in a complex that had seen better days but still beat the places Marcus had lived during his first enlistment. Tyler brushed his teeth, changed into his pajamas with the rocket ships, climbed into bed with the F-22 on the pillow next to him. Marcus sat on the edge of the mattress, same as every night. You excited about tomorrow? Yeah, Grandma said the plane is really big. It is, you'll like it. Will you sit next to me? Right next to you. Window seats all yours. Tyler smiled, then yawned. The day was catching up with him. Dad, do you miss flying, like for real flying? The question landed like a punch. Marcus took a breath, let it out slow. Sometimes. Why'd you stop? Because I had something more important to fly home to. Tyler processed this, eyes already half closed. Me. You. Good. Another yawn. Night, Dad. Night, Ty. Marcus waited until the boy's breathing went deep and even then stood and walked to his own room. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of someone's TV through the walls. He packed light. One change of clothes, toiletries, phone charger. The whole process took maybe 9 minutes. He should sleep. Needed to sleep. Had maybe 4 hours before the alarm would drag him back into consciousness for the drive to DFW. Instead, he walked to the small balcony, slid the door open, stepped out into the night air. A plane passed overhead. Lights, blinking engines, a distant whisper. Marcus tracked it across the sky without thinking, read its altitude and heading from muscle memory, calculated wind correction and fuel burn, and a dozen other variables that didn't matter anymore because he'd never sit in a cockpit again. He'd made that choice 3 years ago. Made it in a hospital room while Rachel slept through morphine dreams, made it watching Tyler play with toy planes in the waiting room, made it when the oncologist used the word terminal, like it was just another medical term instead of the end of the world. The Air Force had offered options: compassionate reassignment, extended leave, even early retirement with benefits if he wanted it. But all of those still meant deployments eventually. Still meant leaving Tyler with babysitters and relatives while Marcus defended freedom at 30,000 feet. So he'd walked away. Turned in his wings. Became Marcus Wade the mechanic instead of Viper 1, the ghost who haunted enemy radar and made impossible intercepts look routine. Some days it felt like the right choice. Most days, honestly. Watching Tyler grow, being there for homework and bedtime, and the million small moments that built a childhood. Other days, it felt like drowning. The phone buzzed in his pocket. Text from a number he didn't recognize. Hey Marcus, it's Jake Sullivan. Forgot to tell you earlier, got a transmission rebuild coming in Monday. Probably a 2-day job. You good for overtime? Marcus typed back, Yeah, thanks for the heads up. The response came fast. You're my best guy, don't forget that. Best guy in a 4-bay garage in Fort Worth. Top of the heap in a very small pile. Not quite the same as being the best fighter pilot in your squadron. The one other pilot studied and tried to emulate the one whose name showed up in after-action reports with words like exceptional and unprecedented attached. Marcus went inside, locked the balcony door, checked on Tyler one more time. The boy had rolled onto his side, the F-22 now tucked under his arm. In sleep, Tyler's face looked so much like Rachel's it hurt to see. Same nose, Same curve to the eyebrows, same expression of absolute peace. Marcus pulled the blanket up to the boy's chin, then forced himself to walk away to his own room, to the bed that still felt too big, even after 3 years of sleeping alone. He set the alarm for 4:15, closed his eyes, tried not to think about how much easier it used to be when the only thing he had to worry about was not getting shot down. The alarm came too soon and too loud. Marcus silenced it, rolled upright, moved through the morning routine on autopilot. Shower shave dress in his least worn jeans and a button-down shirt that Helen had bought him last Christmas. He looked at himself in the mirror and saw a stranger. Too thin, lines around the eyes that hadn't been there before, hair that needed cutting. He woke Tyler at 4:45. The boy stumbled through, getting dressed, still half asleep, clutching the F-22 even while pulling on his shoes. "Can I bring it on the plane?" "Yeah, bud. Just keep it in your lap during takeoff and landing." They ate granola bars in the truck, drank orange juice from bottles, made it to DFW by 5:30. The airport was already crawling with travelers, that particular brand of exhausted chaos that came from people getting up before the sun to go places they may or may not want to be. Marcus parked in long-term, shouldered both backpacks, took Tyler's hand. They walked through sliding doors into the fluorescent brightness of Terminal D. "Whoa!" Tyler breathed, taking in the crowds, the departures board, the sheer scale of everything. "This is huge. Biggest airport in Texas. Come on, check-in's this way." They joined a line at the kiosks. Marcus pulled out the boarding passes Helen had printed, scanned them, got baggage tags they didn't need because they weren't checking anything. The passes showed row 3 seats A and B. Business class. Marcus had never sat in business class in his life, not even during military transport when rank sometimes got you better seats. A woman in an airline uniform appeared at his elbow. "Sir, are you checking bags today?" "No, ma'am. We're good." She glanced at the passes in his hand, and something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, or doubt. Her eyes traveled from the passes to Marcus's worn jeans, to his work boots, to the stains on his hands that no amount of soap ever fully erased. "Business class." "Yes, ma'am." "You're aware that's the business class boarding group, not economy." Marcus felt Tyler's hand tighten in his, felt that familiar heat start to build behind his sternum, the kind that used to fuel him through 8-hour missions where every second demanded perfection. "I can read the boarding passes, ma'am. We're in the right place." She smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile people give when they're trying not to say what they're really thinking. "Of course. Have a nice flight." They moved toward security. Tyler tugged his sleeve. "Dad, why did she look at us like that?" "She was just doing her job. She looked at us the way Mrs. Patterson looks at me when I forget my homework." "Smart kid. Too smart sometimes." "Don't worry about it, Ty. Let's just get to the gate." Security took forever. Shoes off backpacks on the belt, Tyler's toy through the X-ray, while the boy watched anxiously like the TSA might confiscate his most precious possession. They made it through, found gate D17 and settled into uncomfortable chairs to wait for boarding. Tyler pressed his face against the window, watching luggage get loaded, ground crew hustling around the aircraft with practiced efficiency. The plane was a 737-800, probably 8 or 9 years old, based on the livery configured for about 150 passengers. Marcus knew all this without thinking, the same way he knew his own name. Years of reading aircraft specs and performance data didn't just evaporate because you stopped flying. "Dad, look." Tyler pointed at something. "That's a pushback tug, and those are the auxiliary power units." "Good eye, bud. Where'd you learn that?" "YouTube. There's a channel that shows how planes work. It's so cool." Of course there was. Tyler consumed information about aircraft the way other kids consumed cartoons. Every library trip ended with a stack of books about aviation history or aerodynamics simplified for young readers. The kid could identify commercial aircraft by silhouette, knew the difference between turbofan and turbojet engines, understood the basic principles of lift and drag. Rachel used to say Tyler got that from Marcus. The focus, the hunger to understand how things worked, the way his whole face lit up when talking about something he loved. Marcus wished she could see him now. Now boarding all passengers in business class in our premium flyers. Tyler jumped up. That's us. Come on, Dad. They joined the line-handed passes to the gate agent. She scanned them, and Marcus saw it happen again. That quick assessment, the passes, his clothes, his hands, the slight hesitation before handing the passes back. Enjoy your flight. They walked down the jetway. Tyler's excitement was barely contained, asking questions about the aircraft they could see through the windows, about how long the flight would take, about whether they'd see clouds. The flight attendant at the aircraft door smiled at Tyler, then looked at Marcus, and the smile dimmed just slightly. Just enough to notice if you were paying attention. Row 3 was 6 rows behind first class. 2 seats on each side of the aisle, leather instead of fabric, more legroom than Marcus knew what to do with. Tyler scrambled into the window seat and immediately glued his face to the glass. Dad, we can see everything from here. Marcus settled into the middle seat, buckled in. The aisle seat next to him was empty. Maybe it would stay that way. Maybe he'd get lucky and have a little breathing room for once. The universe, as usual, had other plans. She arrived like weather systems do, inevitable and impossible to ignore. Charcoal suit that probably cost more than Marcus made in a month, diamond earrings catching the overhead lights, a leather bag with a designer logo Marcus didn't recognize but knew was expensive. She moved with the kind of confidence that came from never being told no from boardrooms and power lunches, and a life where discomfort was something that happened to other people. She stopped at row 3, checked her boarding pass, looked at Marcus, then checked the pass again, as if reality had made an error. This is my seat. Not a question. A statement of fact, delivered with the expectation of immediate correction. Yes, ma'am. Aisle's all yours. She didn't move, just stood there examining him the way health inspectors examine kitchen grease traps. Her eyes catalogued everything, the jeans, the boots, the stains on his hands that he'd tried once more to scrub away in the airport bathroom. Is that motor oil? Marcus looked at his hands, at the evidence of 12-hour shifts and transmissions that fought back, and a life spent making sure other people's vehicles ran while his own fell apart. I'm a mechanic. Clearly. She sat down, made a show of arranging her jacket so it wouldn't touch his sleeve, pulled out a leather portfolio thick with papers, opened. It created a physical wall between their seats, established her territory. Tyler leaned forward, looked across Marcus at the woman. Hi, I'm Tyler. She didn't look up from her papers. Hi, I'm 7. This is my first time in business class. Do you fly a lot? Nothing. Tyler tried again, holding up his battered F-22. This is my plane. It's a Raptor. My mom gave it to me. It can go Mach 2, which is faster than the speed of sound, and it has stealth technology that makes it almost invisible to radar. I work with the people who build these things. The woman cut him off without looking up. I'm aware of the specifications. Tyler pulled back like he'd been slapped. His smile vanished. The toy dropped to his lap. He turned toward the window, trying to make himself smaller. Marcus felt his hand move to the boy's knee, squeezed gently. Hey, bud, let the lady work, okay? But Dad, I just wanted to... I know. Just play quietly for now. Tyler nodded, tucked the Raptor against his chest. His shoulders had that defeated curve Marcus had seen too many times. The posture of a kid learning that the world didn't want to hear from him, that taking up space was somehow wrong, that enthusiasm was something to be ashamed of. Marcus looked at the woman, at her expensive suit and her diamond earrings and her wall of papers. Looked at her like he used to look at threat assessments during mission briefs. Then he looked away, because Tyler was watching, because making a scene wouldn't help anyone, because he'd promised himself 3 years ago that his son would remember as few bad days as possible, and getting into it with some corporate ice queen in business class would definitely qualify as a bad day. The plane pushed back. The safety demonstration played on screens that nobody watched. Marcus helped Tyler with his seatbelt, made sure the Raptor was secured on the boy's lap. They taxied for what felt like forever. Tyler pressed against the window, watching the ground crew, the other aircraft, the whole ballet of airport operations. He made quiet engine sounds with his mouth, flying his toy in small arcs, keeping the volume down, keeping his elbows in, being so careful not to bother anyone. Being 7 years old and already learning to apologize for existing. The woman next to Marcus sighed, loud enough to be heard, loud enough to be intentional. Marcus ignored it, focused on Tyler, on being present for this moment, this first business-class flight, this trip that Helen had arranged, because she knew somehow that both of them needed something good to remember. The engines spooled up. The 737 accelerated down the runway, building speed, and Tyler's face split into a grin as the nose lifted and the ground fell away. "We're flying, Dad. We're actually flying. We are, Bud. I can see the whole airport, and the cars look tiny, and could you keep it down?" The woman spoke without looking up from her laptop. "Some of us are trying to work." Tyler froze mid-sentence, looked at Marcus with those eyes that were too much like Rachel's. Marcus took a breath, let it out slow. He's excited. It's his first time. That's lovely. He can be excited quietly. 15 minutes into the flight, the drink cart appeared. Marcus ordered ginger ale for Tyler, coffee for himself. Black 1 sugar, same as always. The woman leaned across Marcus without warning. "Could you also bring me sparkling water? And is there someone I could speak to about the noise level in this section?" The flight attendant glanced at Tyler, who had frozen with his toy clutching in both hands. "I'm sorry, ma'am. What noise?" "There's a child, playing with a toy, making airplane sounds. It's incredibly distracting." "Ma'am, he's been very quiet. This is business class. I paid for a professional environment, not a daycare." Something inside Marcus went very still. The same stillness that used to settle over him in the seconds before a merge, when everything slowed down and the only thing that mattered was the next decision. "Ma'am." His voice came out level. Not angry, not aggressive, just level. "My son is sitting quietly, playing with a toy. He hasn't bumped your seat, hasn't touched your things, hasn't raised his voice. He's a 7-year-old kid on a plane." The woman turned to face him for the first time since takeoff. Her eyes were cold, calculating, the eyes of someone used to winning arguments through sheer force of status. "Do you know who I am?" "No, ma'am, and I don't need to." "I'm Charlotte Pierce, Senior Vice President of Strategic Acquisitions at Sentinel Defense Technologies. I sit in rooms where decisions are made about aircraft that fly over your head every single day. I have dinner with generals. I brief Pentagon officials." Marcus looked at her for a long beat, let the silence stretch just enough to be uncomfortable. "That's impressive." "It should be. And yet here you are, on the same plane as me, in the same row, breathing the same recycled air, bothered by a 7-year-old's toy." Someone 2 rows back made a sound that might have been a laugh. Charlotte heard it. Her face flushed. She jammed earbuds into her ears, turned back to her laptop with enough force that the tray table rattled. Marcus accepted his coffee from the flight attendant, who gave him the smallest nod of approval. He passed the ginger ale to Tyler, who took it with both hands. "Thanks, Dad." "You're welcome, Bud." Tyler took a sip, then set the can carefully in the armrest holder. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "She doesn't like me. She doesn't know you. That's different. She doesn't like you either." Marcus couldn't argue with that. "I've had people not like me before, still here." "Because of your hands." The question landed harder than it should have. Marcus set his coffee down before he spilled it. "What do you mean? Your hands are always different. The other kids' dads don't have hands like yours, and some of them say—" Tyler stopped. "Say what?" "They say you're poor. They say that's why Mom left." Marcus's throat closed. For 3 full seconds he couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The cabin pressure seemed to drop, through the instruments would have shown everything normal. Your mom didn't leave, Tyler. She got sick. You know that. I know, but they don't. And it still hurts. Marcus unbuckled, pulled Tyler against his side. The boy's head fit perfectly against his ribs. The battered F-22 pressed between them, its broken wing digging into Marcus's chest like accusation and promise all mixed together. Listen to me. These hands you're talking about, these hands changed Mrs. Ramirez's oil so she could drive to her treatments. These hands fixed Mr. Tran's transmission so he could get to work and feed his kids. These hands packed your lunch this morning. These hands held your mom's hand in the hospital every single night when nobody else could stay. Marcus paused, made sure Tyler was looking at him. These hands aren't dirty, son. They're proof that I showed up. Tyler studied his father's hands like he was seeing them for the first time. The scars, the permanent stains, the calluses from tools and trouble. Then he reached out, took one of those hands in both of his, held on. They sat like that, while the 737 hummed through the sky, while Charlotte Pierce typed with aggressive precision on her laptop, while other passengers read or slept or stared at screens, while the ordinary miracle of flight carried them all toward whatever waited on the ground. Then the plane dropped. Not the gentle bounce of light turbulence, a violent stomach-lurching fall that sent carry-ons rattling in overhead bins and coffee splashing across tray tables. The cabin lights flickered. Someone in the back screamed. The seatbelt sign slammed on with a sharp ding. And then the captain's voice came through the speakers, but it wasn't the smooth, rehearsed tone passengers expected. It was tight, controlled. The kind of tight and controlled that Marcus recognized instantly because he'd used that exact voice himself once 35,000 feet over the Nevada desert when his left engine caught fire and every alarm in the cockpit was screaming. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We've encountered a technical issue with one of our flight systems. As a precautionary measure, we'll be diverting to the nearest suitable airfield. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. Flight attendants prepare the cabin for landing. The cabin erupted. Not panic, not yet, but the electric static of fear spreading through enclosed spaces. Whispered prayers, rapid texting, the particular sound of people remembering their mortality. Charlotte's laptop slid off her tray table. She grabbed for it, missed, let it fall to the floor. Her knuckles were white on the armrests. Tyler looked up at Marcus with eyes that were too big in his small face. Dad? Yeah, bud. Are we going to crash? Marcus Wade, former F-22 pilot, call sign, Viper 1. The ghost who'd made impossible intercepts and come home when nobody thought he would, looked at his 7-year-old son and felt everything slow down the way it used to in combat. He could lie, could panic, could freeze. He did none of those things. He listened. The engine tone was wrong, not catastrophically wrong, but wrong enough. A subtle oscillation in the left turbofan that most passengers wouldn't notice, that the flight attendants probably couldn't hear, that the pilots were certainly monitoring, but might not have fully diagnosed yet. Marcus had spent 4 years listening to twin Pratt and Whitney F-119 engines at full afterburner. Had learned to hear the difference between a healthy engine and a sick one, the way a musician hears a note off-key. This was a compressor issue, probably a damaged blade, creating vibration that would only get worse with continued operation. He checked the descent angle by the feel of the seat pressing into his back, noted the wind correction by the slight yaw to the right, counted the seconds between the announcement and the change in flap configuration. Everything tracked. The pilots were executing a textbook diversion. By the book. Professional. They'd be fine. We're okay. Marcus wrapped his arm around Tyler, pulled him close. The pilots know what they're doing. How do you know? The question hung there. Marcus could deflect, could change the subject, could keep the wall up between who he used to be and who he was now. Because I used to do what they do. Tyler went very still. What? I was a pilot, a long time ago. You? Tyler pulled back to look at his father's face. You were a pilot, like a real pilot. Yeah. You never told me that. I know. Why? Marcus didn't answer right away. The plane was banking left, starting its descent. He could feel the landing gear deploying through the vibration in the floor, could read the altitude loss in his inner ear, could track their approach vector like it was written on the back of his eyelids. Because that was a different life, and this life with you is the one that matters. Tyler processed this, his 7-year-old brain working through implications and questions. But before he could ask more, Charlotte Pierce made a sound that might have been a sob. Marcus looked over. The woman who'd been so composed, so cold, so absolutely certain of her importance, was leaning forward in her seat, breathing fast and shallow. Her laptop lay forgotten on the floor. Her portfolio had spilled papers into the aisle. Every bit of her armor had cracked. She turned to Marcus, and her voice came out small and scared. "Are we going to be okay?" "Marcus." Wade looked at this woman who'd dismissed his son, who'd recoiled from his hands, who'd recited her title like it was a shield against the world. He could ignore her, could let her sit in her fear, could consider it cosmic justice. He didn't. "We're landing at an Air Force base. The descent rate is stable. The pilots are executing a textbook diversion. We'll be on the ground in 4 minutes. She stared at him. "How do you know all that?" "I just do." 3 minutes and 48 seconds later, the wheels hit concrete. Hard but controlled. The kind of landing that came from pilots who knew exactly what they were doing and had done it under worse circumstances. The cabin erupted in applause. People clapped and cheered and laughed with the nervous relief of those who'd just remembered they were mortal and been given another day anyway. Marcus didn't clap. He sat perfectly still, arm around his son, eyes closed, feeling the reverse thrust, engaged, counting the distance to full stop by the deceleration forces pushing against his chest. Old habits. They never really left. "Dad." Tyler's voice was full of wonder. "Dad, look." Marcus opened his eyes and looked where his son was pointing. Lined up along the far side of the taxiway, gleaming under the brutal Texas sun, were 6 F-22 Raptors. Real ones. Not toys, not pictures. The actual aircraft, angular and predatory, the most advanced fighter jets ever built. Marcus's breath caught. He hadn't seen one up close in 3 years. Not since the day he'd walked away from everything. Not since Rachel's diagnosis. Not since he'd traded the sky for the ground and convinced himself it was the right choice. He stared at those jets and felt something crack open inside him. Something he'd welded shut and buried deep. Something that had been screaming silently for 3 years while he changed oil and fixed transmissions and pretended that being a mechanic was enough to fill the hole in his chest. Tyler pressed his toy against the window, held it up next to the real thing. "Dad." The boy's whisper was reverent. "They're the same." Marcus couldn't speak, could barely breathe. He just nodded, and for the first time in 3 years, his eyes burned. Passengers filed off the aircraft with the dazed shuffle of people who'd just touched mortality and needed to remember how their legs worked. Some clutched phones to their ears, voices too loud telling loved ones they were safe. Others moved in silence, carrying their bags like refugees from a disaster that hadn't quite happened. Marcus stayed in his seat. Let the aisle clear. His legs felt welded to the floor, not from fear, but from the weight of those 6 Raptors outside the window. They'd cracked something open in him that 3 years of discipline couldn't keep shut. The whine of twin Pratt and Whitney engines spooling up at dawn, the click of his oxygen mask locking into place, the voice of his weapons systems officer reading coordinates in a tone so calm it could have been a grocery list instead of targeting data for live ordnance, all of it flooding back like water through a broken dam. "Dad, come on." Tyler tugged his hand. "I want to see the jets." Marcus blinked, surfaced from the memories. "We can't just walk up to them, bud. This is a military installation." "But they're right there." "Rules don't change because we're close." "You always say that." "Because it's always true." They moved up the jetway into a terminal that clearly hadn't been designed for civilian traffic. Concrete floors, metal chairs bolted down in rows, fluorescent lights that turned everyone slightly corpse-like. A vending machine in the corner looked like it predated the First Gulf War. This was a military transit facility, Spartan and functional, built for people who understood that comfort was a luxury and mission came first. An airline employee stood near a folding table with a clipboard explaining to a cluster of passengers that a replacement aircraft was being arranged. 2 to 3 hours, she kept saying, though her expression suggested she had no real idea. Charlotte Pierce was already at the table, her voice carrying across the space. 2 to 3 hours is unacceptable. I have a meeting in Washington at 6 o'clock. Do you understand what's at stake? The employee's smile had gone rigid. Ma'am, we're doing everything we can. Everything you can isn't good enough. I need to be on another flight. Charter something. I don't care about the cost. Ma'am, this is a military installation. We can't arrange charter aircraft from here. Then get me a car, a helicopter, something. Marcus walked past the scene without slowing, found 2 chairs near the wall far from the gathering frustration. Tyler dropped into one, immediately started flying his Raptor in small loops, making sounds so quiet they were almost just breath. You hungry? A little. Marcus walked to the vending machine, fed it 4 crumpled dollar bills, got pretzels and water. The machine ate his 5th dollar without delivering the granola bar he'd selected. He hit the side with the heel of his palm. Nothing happened. You've got to hit it lower. Bottom left. The coin mechanism sticks. Marcus turned. A young man in a flight suit stood there, maybe 28 lieutenant's bars on his shoulders. The patch on his chest read 58th Fighter Squadron. On his sleeve, the unmistakable silhouette of an F-22 Raptor. Marcus's pulse shifted, became something it hadn't been in 3 years. Thanks. He hit the machine where indicated. The granola bar dropped. The lieutenant grinned. Works every time. That machine's been broken since I got stationed here. Nobody fixes it. We just learn its personality. Marcus almost smiled. Sounds about right. The younger man's eyes did a quick assessment. Not hostile, just automatic, taking in Marcus's civilian clothes, his work boots, his hands, the way pilots always evaluated, always categorized. You waiting on the replacement aircraft? Yeah, my son and I were on the diverted flight. Rough ride. Engine sounded off even from the ground. Compressor issue in the left turbofan. Probably a damaged blade causing vibration. Pilots handled it well. The lieutenant's eyebrows went up. You caught all that from the cabin. Hard to miss once you know what to listen for. Something changed in the young pilot's face. A flicker of interest, maybe recognition that Marcus wasn't just another civilian. What do you do, if you don't mind me asking? I'm a mechanic. Auto shop in Fort Worth. Before that, Marcus picked up the granola bar, turned it over in his hands. Before that doesn't matter much anymore. The lieutenant studied him for a long moment, and Marcus could see the wheels turning. But whatever the younger man was thinking, he kept it to himself. Well, hope the rest of your trip goes smoother, Mr. Wade. Marcus Wade. The name hung in the air for exactly 2 seconds. Then something flickered across the lieutenant's face. Recognition, maybe. Or the ghost of recognition, like hearing a song you can't quite place. Marcus Wade. The lieutenant repeated it slowly. Have we met before? No. You sure? Because your name is really familiar? I get that sometimes. Common name. The younger man nodded, but his eyes said he wasn't convinced. He stuck out his hand. Lieutenant Cole Brennan. I fly the 22. They shook. Cole's grip was firm, confident, the grip of someone who'd never doubted his place in the world. Take care of that kid, Mr. Wade. Always do. Cole walked away, joined a group of 3 other pilots near the entrance to the restricted area. They were laughing about something, holding paper coffee cups, flight suits unzipped in that casual way fighter pilots wore their uniform when they were off the clock but still on base. Marcus carried the food back to Tyler. Here, eat. Thanks, Dad. Who was that guy? A pilot. A Raptor pilot. Yeah. Did you tell him you used to fly? No. Why not? Marcus sat down, let out a breath that felt like it weighed 40 pounds. Because it's not important. It's important to me. The words landed like a physical blow. Marcus looked at his son, this 7-year-old who saw everything and understood more than he should. Tyler, when your mom got sick, I had a choice. Keep flying or come home and take care of her, take care of you. I couldn't do both. I know. So I hung it up, turned in my wings, and I don't regret it. Not for 1 second. But you miss it. Marcus didn't answer immediately. The silence stretched, filled with the ambient noise of the terminal, other people's conversations, the hum of fluorescent lights. Yeah, I miss it. Then why don't you tell people? Because it feels like bragging about somebody else's life. That person, that pilot, he doesn't exist anymore. I'm just a mechanic now. I'm just your dad. Tyler set down his pretzels, looked at Marcus with an intensity that belonged on a much older face. You're not just anything, Dad. Before Marcus could respond, the restricted access door opened. Cole Brennan came through again, and this time he had company. 2 more pilots followed him. An older one, maybe mid-40s, with a major's oak leaves on his shoulders, and the kind of weathered face that came from years of pulling G's at the edge of human tolerance. Behind him, a female captain with a patch Marcus recognized immediately, the 94th Fighter Squadron had in the ring, the oldest fighter squadron in the United States Air Force. They were walking with purpose, not wandering, not casual, walking directly toward Marcus. Cole stopped about 10 feet away. His expression had changed completely from the easy confidence at the vending machine. Now he looked like someone who'd just solved a puzzle and didn't quite believe the answer. Mr. Wade. Marcus stood slowly. Lieutenant? Sir, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. Every muscle in Marcus's body went still. All right. Cole pointed at Marcus's left wrist. That bracelet. The steel one. Can I see it? Marcus looked down at the memorial band. Brushed steel thin, worn from 3 years of constant wear. He'd forgotten it was even visible the way you forget about scars after enough time passes. He held up his wrist. Cole leaned in, read the engraving. Then he stepped back and his face went absolutely white. Viper 1. The terminal seemed to contract. Sound faded to a dull roar. The major stepped forward and his eyes locked onto Marcus with an intensity that made the earlier assessment seem casual. You're Viper 1. It wasn't a question. Marcus forced himself to breathe. I was, sir. The major's jaw worked for a moment before words came out. We study your missions at weapons school, your engagement over Red Rock Canyon, your tactical doctrine on multi-axis intercepts. You wrote the playbook we train from. That was a long time ago. 3 years isn't a long time, sir. Marcus stood there in his civilian clothes, work boots, and oil-stained hands, while 3 F-22 pilots looked at him like he'd just materialized from myth. He hated it, loved it, couldn't decide which feeling was stronger. The female captain spoke for the first time. Her name tag read Chen. Sir, is it true you executed a defensive split against 4 hostile contacts over Red Rock Canyon with a damaged flight control system? There were only 3 contacts. The 4th was a false return on radar. I called it out in real time, but the debrief never got corrected. The major and Captain Chen exchanged a look. The kind of look that said this man just corrected official military records from memory without hesitation. Cole was shaking his head slowly. I can't believe this. We had a bet in the squadron about whether you were even real. Some of the guys thought Viper 1 was a composite, a training construct. Nobody could actually do what the records say you did. It wasn't that impressive. The major's expression suggested strong disagreement. Sir, you pulled an 11G turn at 47,000 feet in a jet with a compromised flight computer and still put ordnance on target. That's in every tactical manual we study. I also threw up in my mask afterward. That part didn't make the manual. Cole laughed, and the sound broke something in the air. Even Marcus felt the corner of his mouth twitch. Tyler was standing beside his father now, looking up at the pilots with eyes that took up half his face. The toy raptor was clutched against his chest. Captain Chen noticed him. She crouched down to his level. Hey there. What's your name, Tyler? That's a cool jet you've got, Tyler. It's an F-22 Raptor. My mom gave it to me. Your mom has good taste. She died. The words came out flat and simple, the way children deliver the worst truths, without cushion, without preamble, just fact. Chen didn't flinch. She held the boy's gaze and nodded. I'm sorry to hear that, Tyler. She must have been pretty special. She was. She knew Dad was a pilot even though he doesn't like to talk about it. Chen looked up at Marcus and something passed between them, an understanding that only people who'd sacrificed enormously could share. The Major cleared his throat. Mr. Wade, I'd like to make a phone call, with your permission. To who? Colonel Mitchell. He's the base commander. I think he'd want to know you're here. Marcus felt like someone had hit him in the sternum. Mitchell is here. Took command 6 months ago. I didn't know that. He doesn't know you're here either, but I guarantee he'll want to. Marcus stood still while the weight of the moment pressed down. 3 years. 3 years since he'd been in a world that spoke his language, knew his name, understood what he'd done and what it cost to walk away. 3 years of oil changes and tire rotations and school lunches and bedtime stories and quiet nights on the porch, watching jets trace lines across a sky he could no longer touch. And now here he was, standing in a military terminal with 3 F-22 pilots looking at him like he mattered. He looked down at Tyler. The boy looked back with Rachel's eyes. Dad? Tyler's voice was quiet. It's okay. What's okay? It's okay to let them see you. 7 years old. 7 years old, and the kid understood things most people spent lifetimes trying to figure out. Marcus looked at the Major. Make the call. The Major nodded once and disappeared through the restricted access door. Cole exhaled like he'd been holding his breath. Sir, while we wait, can I get you coffee? Something from the officer's mess. It's better than the vending machine. The vending machine tried to steal my money, so that's a low bar. Welcome to the United States Air Force, sir. This time Marcus actually laughed. A real laugh from somewhere deep, a place that had been locked down for 3 years. It surprised him. Surprised everyone. Tyler grinned up at his father. You never laugh like that, Dad. I used to. You should do it more. Yeah, maybe I should. Captain Chen held out her hand to Tyler. Tyler, you want to come with us? Get some real food. We've got a kitchen that makes grilled cheese that'll change your life. Tyler looked at Marcus for permission. Marcus nodded. Can I bring my jet? You better bring your jet. Can't walk into a fighter squadron without proper equipment. They moved toward the restricted door. Marcus walked behind Tyler, watching the boy talk with Chen about the differences between the F-22 and F-35, information absorbed from library books and YouTube videos, and late nights asking questions. His father answered carefully, giving just enough to feed curiosity without opening the floodgates of his own grief. As they reached the door, Cole swiped his badge and held it open. He fell into step beside Marcus. Sir, can I ask you something? Go ahead. Why'd you leave? Marcus walked in silence for a few steps. The corridor was long and gray, standard military construction, and their boots echoed off the linoleum. My wife was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. 8 months from diagnosis to funeral. Tyler was 4. He needed a parent, not a deployment schedule. I'm sorry, sir. Don't be. I'd make the same choice 1,000 times. Cole's voice came quieter. That's why they talk about you the way they do. Because I quit. Because you didn't quit. You just changed missions. Marcus stopped walking, turned to look at the young lieutenant, this kid who couldn't be more than 30, who flew the most advanced fighter jet on Earth and probably thought he was invincible the way all young fighter pilots think they're invincible until the world teaches them otherwise. That might be the smartest thing a lieutenant's ever said to me. Cole grinned. Don't tell my flight commander. He thinks I'm an idiot. They kept walking. Ahead, Tyler was telling Chen about his school, his best friend Marcus, the model airplane kit Marcus had bought him for his birthday. The boy was laughing, and Marcus realized with a force that nearly stopped him in his tracks that Tyler hadn't laughed like that around strangers in a very long time. They turned a corner and passed through another set of doors. Suddenly they were in the operations wing of an active fighter squadron, flight schedules on whiteboards, mission briefs tacked to corkboards, the smell of jet fuel and coffee and leather that Marcus knew as well as he knew his own heartbeat. His body responded before his mind caught up. Posture straightened, chin lifted. Steps fell into a rhythm that wasn't a walk anymore. It was a march. Muscle memory from 1,000 corridors, just like this one, Cole noticed. Didn't say anything but noticed. Ahead of them, a door opened, and a voice Marcus hadn't heard in 3 years filled the hallway. "Well, I'll be damned." Colonel Ryan Mitchell stood in the doorway of his office. Silver-haired, broad-shouldered, a face carved from granite and discipline and 30 years of military service. He wore his flight suit like a second skin, and his eyes, sharp, assessing, and right now filled with something that looked a hell of a lot like emotion, were locked directly on Marcus. "Viper 1, in my terminal, in civilian clothes, with grease on his hands." Marcus stood in the corridor and looked at the man who'd once pinned wings on his chest. "Colonel?" "It's been 3 years, son." "Yes, sir." "You look terrible." "Thank you, sir." Mitchell walked forward, didn't extend his hand, wrapped both arms around Marcus, and pulled him into a hug that lasted 5 full seconds. When he let go, his eyes were red. "Get in my office, both of you. The boy, too." Tyler looked up at the colonel with wide eyes. "Are you in charge of all this?" Mitchell looked down at the 7-year-old with the scratched-up toy raptor. "Son, I'm in charge of this whole base." "Cool. Can I see a real F-22? Mitchell looked at Marcus. Marcus shrugged. "Colonel, I've learned not to argue with him. He's more stubborn than any pilot I ever flew with." Mitchell laughed, deep and full and commanding, echoing down the corridor. "Well then, I think we can arrange something." He put his hand on Marcus's shoulder and guided them into the office. The door closed behind them. Mitchell's office smelled like coffee that had been sitting on a burner too long and leather worn through decades of service. Marcus sat in the chair across from the colonel's desk and felt the weight of the room settle into his bones. Squadron photos on the wall, challenge coins lined up on the shelf, a framed flag behind the desk that had flown over the Nevada test range during combat exercises. He'd sat in offices like this 100 times, but never as a civilian, never with grease under his nails, never with a 7-year-old beside him eating a granola bar. Tyler had climbed into the second chair leg, swinging too short to reach the floor. He held the toy raptor on the armrest and studied the squadron photos like he was memorizing every face. Mitchell closed the door and walked around his desk. Didn't sit immediately, just stood there looking at Marcus the way a man looks at a friend he thought he'd lost. 3 years. Not a phone call, not an email, not a damn Christmas card. I didn't know what to say. How about, "Hey, I'm alive. I'm fixing cars in Fort Worth. My kid's doing okay." Something, anything. I wasn't sure any of that was true. Mitchell sat down slowly, leaned forward with his elbows on the desk. "How bad did it get?" Marcus rubbed his hands together. The grease in the creases caught the overhead light. "After Rachel died, I had about 4 months of savings. Funeral took most of it. Sold the house because I couldn't make the payments. Moved to Fort Worth because Helen lives there and I needed someone to watch Tyler while I worked. You could have called me and said what, 'Hey, Colonel, the best pilot in your squadron is broken and needs a handout.' No, I wasn't going to do that. It wouldn't have been a handout. It would have felt like one." Mitchell was quiet for a moment. He looked at Tyler. "Your dad's a proud man, son. You know that." Tyler nodded. "He's stubborn, too. Runs in the breed." "What breed?" "Fighter pilots." Mitchell grinned, despite himself. Then his face went serious. "Tyler, can I tell you something about your dad?" "Okay." "Your dad wasn't good. Good is what we call pilots who don't crash and follow orders. Your dad was something else entirely." Tyler's eyes went wide. There's maybe 5 pilots in the entire United States Air Force who could do what your father did in the air, and I'm being generous with the number 5. What did he do? He did things in a Raptor that the engineers said the jet couldn't do. He flew training scenarios that nobody else would take, and one time during a high-risk exercise in the Nevada desert, he saved 17 personnel on the ground by staying in a fight any reasonable pilot would have walked away from. Tyler turned to his father. You saved 17 people. Marcus's jaw was tight. The ground team did the hard part. I just provided cover. Mitchell shook his head. Don't let him do that. Don't let him shrink what he did. Your father flew for 6 hours straight in a damaged aircraft and refused to disengage until every last person was extracted. He landed with 11 minutes of fuel remaining. 11 minutes. You know what we call that in the Air Force? What? We call it insane. And then we give the pilot a medal. Tyler looked at his father with an expression Marcus had never seen before. Not just admiration, something deeper. The look of a child recalculating everything he thought he knew about the person sitting next to him. Dad, why didn't you tell me any of this? Marcus leaned forward, forearms on his knees, stared at his hands. Because heroes in stories are simple, Tyler. They do the brave thing and everybody cheers. Real life isn't like that. I did my job, did it well. Then your mom got sick and I had to choose between flying and being your father. I chose you. I'd choose you again every single time. He paused, made sure Tyler was looking at him. But choosing you meant leaving the only other thing I was ever good at. And that hurt. It still hurts. Every single day. The room went silent. Mitchell rubbed his face with both hands. When he dropped them, his eyes were wet. You stubborn son of a gun. You've been carrying all of this alone. Tyler helps me carry it. I carry his lunchbox, Tyler offered. The tension shattered like glass. Mitchell laughed. Marcus laughed. Tyler beamed proud that he'd broken something that needed breaking. Mitchell stood up and walked to his window, looked out at the flight line where 6 Raptors sat in their hardened shelters. Marcus, I need to tell you something. The 58th has been running a new tactical program, advanced threat simulation, high-end combat training, and every single lesson plan in that program starts with your name. My name, your engagements, your maneuvers, your after-action reports. Cole Brennan told me last month that the new pilots argue about whether Viper 1 was a real person or a training myth. They study your flight data like scripture. That's flattering, but it doesn't change anything. It changes everything. Because those pilots need more than flight data. They need the man who created it. They need context, judgment, instinct. The stuff that doesn't show up on screens. Marcus shook his head. Ryan, I fix cars. I pick up my kid from school. I make mac and cheese 4 nights a week because it's the only thing he'll eat without complaining. I'm not the guy you remember. You're exactly the guy I remember. You're just tired. I'm more than tired. Then let me help. I told you I don't want a handout. Mitchell's voice changed, shifted from friend to commander. I'm not offering a handout. I'm offering a mission. There's a difference, and you know it. Before Marcus could respond, there was a knock at the door. Cole stuck his head in. Colonel, sorry to interrupt. The maintenance crew heard what's going on. Word travels fast. What kind of word? That Viper 1 is in the building, sir. There's about 20 people in the hallway who want to meet him. Mitchell looked at Marcus. What do you say? I say this is getting out of hand. Welcome to being a legend. I'm not a legend. Tyler stood up from his chair. Dad, can we go? Can we see the jets? Please. Marcus looked at his son. The boy's eyes were lit up like runways at dusk. Okay, let's go. Mitchell opened the door, and the hallway was full. Not just the 3 pilots from earlier. Crew chiefs in green coveralls, weapons loaders with grease on their hands that matched Marcus's, maintenance officers, a flight surgeon, 2 intel analysts, and standing at the back at rigid attention, a senior master sergeant with 30 years of service stripes on his sleeve and tears running down his face. Nobody spoke at first. Then Major Samuel Hart, the pilot who'd first confirmed Marcus's identity, stepped to the center of the corridor. He faced Marcus and snapped to attention. "Viper 1 on deck." The hallway came alive. Every person in uniform straightened. Heels clicked together. 23 hands rose to foreheads. 23 salutes, rigid and precise, aimed at a man in a faded Carhartt jacket with oil stains on his jeans. Marcus stopped walking. He stood in the doorway of Mitchell's office with his son at his side and 23 military professionals saluting him, and he did not know what to do with his hands. He wasn't in uniform, wasn't active duty. Protocol said civilians don't return salutes. But his right arm was already moving. Muscle memory overriding everything. 3 years of civilian life dissolving in the time it took his hand to travel from his side to his temple. He saluted, held it. The senior master sergeant in the back let out a breath that might have been a sob. Tyler stood beside his father, watching. He didn't fully understand what was happening, but he understood enough. He understood that these people knew his father. He understood that they respected him. He understood that the man who packed his lunch and drove him to school and fell asleep on the couch with his boots still on was to these people something extraordinary. The boy looked up at his father and saw him standing straight for the first time he could remember. Not hunched, not tired, not folded into himself the way he was at the grocery store or the parent-teacher conference or the garage. He was standing the way a man stands when he remembers who he is. Tyler's chin trembled. Then, without anyone telling him to, the boy raised his small hand to his forehead and saluted too. The hallway fell apart. Hart broke first, dropped his salute, and pressed his fist against his mouth. Captain Chen turned away and wiped her eyes. Cole just stood there, shaking his head with a grin so wide it could have landed a plane. The senior master sergeant walked forward. His name tag read Torres. He stopped in front of Marcus and extended his hand. "Sir, I was ground crew at Nellis. Night. You flew the emergency extraction training mission. I was the one who chocked your wheels when you landed. Your jet was so low on fuel we couldn't even taxi it. Had to tow it." Marcus took his hand. "I remember. You said something to me on the tarmac that night. I said, 'You crazy bastard.' You actually did it." "Yeah, that was it." Torres gripped harder. "I meant it then. I mean it now. You crazy bastard, sir." Mitchell stepped into the hallway. "All right, enough standing around getting emotional. Viper 1's son wants to see an F-22 up close. Who's going to make that happen?" Every hand in the corridor went up. They moved through the building and out onto the flight line as a group. Marcus walked in the middle, surrounded by pilots and crew. Tyler riding on Cole's shoulders, the boy pointing out aircraft, asking questions faster than Cole could answer them. They stopped at a shelter where an F-22 sat in maintenance configuration. Panels open, systems accessible. Massive up close. 62 feet of stealth geometry and twin-engine fury that looked like it had been designed by someone who hated physics and loved speed. Tyler's mouth fell open. "Dad, Dad." Marcus stood at the nose and looked up. 3 years. 3 years since he'd been this close. He could smell it. Jet fuel and hydraulic fluid and the faint metallic scent of radar-absorbent material baking in the sun. It hit him like a scent from childhood, like his mother's kitchen, like the leather of his first baseball glove, the smell of who he used to be. He put his hand on the fuselage. The composite skin was hot from the Texas sun. He ran his fingers along the leading edge of the intake, feeling for imperfections out of habit. Chen appeared beside him. "Still checking our work, sir." "Force of habit." "Want to see the cockpit?" Marcus hesitated. "I think my son would like that more than me." "I think you're wrong. But let's start with him." Cole lowered Tyler from his shoulders. Chen lifted the boy up the integrated boarding ladder. 2 crew chiefs steadied him from below. Tyler climbed into the cockpit of an F-22 Raptor, the same type of aircraft his father had flown, the same aircraft his mother had given him a toy replica of, the same machine that lived in his imagination every time he flew the battered little model through the air of their small apartment. He sat in the ejection seat. His feet couldn't reach the rudder pedals. His hands could barely grip the side stick. The helmet on the canopy rail was 3 sizes too big. none of that mattered. He looked down at his father from the cockpit, and the expression on that boy's face was something every person on that flight line would remember for the rest of their lives. Pure, absolute, radiant pride. "Dad, I can see everything from up here." Marcus looked up at his son framed in the cockpit of a Raptor, and his vision blurred. He blinked hard. Then again, it didn't help. "How's it feel?" "It feels like flying." Torres walked up beside Marcus, spoke quietly. "We had a pilot once told me the first time he sat in a cockpit, he knew he was home." "Who said that?" "You did, sir. Nellis, 2 in the morning. You were sitting on the wing eating an MRE. You said, 'Torres, the first time I sat in one of these I was home.' I never forgot it." Marcus watched his son lean forward in the cockpit, studying every switch, asking Chen questions faster than she could answer them. "I remember saying that. Look at your boy up there. I think home might be hereditary." A commotion near the terminal caught Marcus's attention. He turned and saw a small group of passengers from the diverted flight being led on a brief tour by a public affairs officer. Most were clustered together taking photos with their phones. At the edge of the group, standing apart, was Charlotte Pierce. She had seen everything: the salutes in the hallway, the pilots surrounding Marcus, the crew chiefs shaking his hand, his son in the cockpit, all of it. She stood perfectly still, arms at her sides, phone forgotten in her hand. The wind caught her hair and she didn't fix it. The sun was in her eyes and she didn't shield them. She just watched. Marcus saw her. Their eyes met across 40 yards of tarmac. She didn't look away. Neither did he. For a long moment they simply looked at each other. Two people from different worlds standing on the same ground with everything they thought they knew about the other turned completely upside down. Then Charlotte did something Marcus didn't expect. She lowered her head. Not a nod, not a gesture. Something more. Something that cost her something. She lowered her head the way a person does when they are truly, deeply ashamed. Marcus turned back to the jet. "Hey, Tyler. You about ready to come down?" "5 more minutes, Dad. Please." "That's what you said 5 minutes ago." "5 more after that, then." The crew laughed. Cole clapped Marcus on the shoulder. Torres shook his head with a grin. Chen was up on the ladder showing Tyler the heads-up display, and the boy was absorbing every word like he'd been born to sit in that seat. Mitchell walked up beside Marcus. They stood shoulder to shoulder watching the boy. "He's got your eyes. He's got his mother's eyes. He's got your focus. Watch how he tracks every instrument. He's not just looking, he's reading, processing. That's you, Marcus. That's pure Viper 1. He's 7. You were 7 once, and I bet you did the exact same thing the first time you saw a cockpit." Marcus said nothing because Mitchell was right. "I wasn't kidding about the consulting position. Part-time, flexible schedule, work around Tyler's school, come down 2, maybe 3 days a week, teach these young pilots what the flight data can't teach them. And what's that? How to think when everything goes wrong. How to make decisions in 3 seconds that take analysts 3 weeks to second guess. How to stay in the fight when every instrument is telling you to leave. I don't have a flight suit anymore. We have a closet full of them. Don't have a clearance anymore. I can have that reinstated in 48 hours. I have a son who needs me. And he'll have a father who's not just surviving. He'll have a father who's alive again." That last one landed hard. Marcus felt it in his chest, in his gut, in the backs of his eyes. Because Mitchell wasn't wrong. For 3 years, Marcus had been surviving, making it through each day, paying the bills, feeding the boy, keeping the lights on and the car running, and the grief locked below the waterline where nobody could see it. But he hadn't been alive. Not really. Not the way he was alive right now, standing on a flight line with jet fuel in the air and his son in a cockpit and people around him who knew his name and what it meant. "I'll think about it." "Don't think too long. The Air Force doesn't wait around for anyone. Not even legends." "I'm not a legend." "Marcus, look around you." Marcus looked. Pilots who studied his missions. Crew chiefs who remembered his name. A base commander who'd hugged him in his office. a boy in a cockpit smiling wider than he'd smiled since his mother was alive. "Okay, maybe I'm a little bit of a legend." Mitchell grinned. "That's the most self-aware thing you've ever said." Tyler finally came down from the cockpit. Chen carried him on her hip down the ladder, and when his feet hit the tarmac he ran straight to his father and threw his arms around Marcus's waist. "Dad, I sat in your jet. I saw it. It smelled funny. That's jet fuel. I like it. Mom was wrong. It smells like you." Marcus picked up his son and held him. The boy wrapped his arms around his neck and pressed his face against his shoulder. The toy raptor dug into Marcus's back and he didn't care. He held his son on the flight line of an Air Force base surrounded by raptors and pilots and crew, and for the first time in 3 years, he felt something he'd forgotten existed. He felt whole. The announcement came over the PA system 40 minutes later. The replacement aircraft had arrived. Passengers were asked to begin reboarding at Gate 2. Marcus sat in the officers' mess with Tyler on one side and Colonel Mitchell on the other. Cole and Chen were across the table. Torres had pulled up a chair at the end and was telling Tyler about the time a pelican got sucked into an engine intake during a training sortie, and the entire maintenance crew spent 3 days pulling feathers out of a turbine. 3 days. Tyler's eyes were wide. 3 days. And it wasn't a small bird, it was a pelican. A pelican. "Biggest pelican you've ever seen. We named him Gerald. You named the bird that got sucked into the engine. We named what was left of him. Coping mechanism." The table laughed, and then the PA crackled again, and the laughter faded because that announcement meant this was ending. This strange pocket of time where Marcus had been allowed to be someone he hadn't been in 3 years was closing. The real world was calling them back. Tyler's face fell. "Do we have to go?" "We do, Bud. Grandma's expecting us. Can't we stay just a little longer?" "We'll miss our flight." "I don't care about the flight. I like it here." Marcus felt the pull of that statement in every direction at once. He liked it here too, more than he wanted to admit, more than was safe to admit, because liking something meant wanting it, and wanting something meant losing it could destroy you, and he'd already lost enough. Mitchell stood from the table. "Marcus, walk with me." They left the mess and moved down a corridor toward the main terminal. Mitchell kept his pace slow, deliberate, the walk of a man who had something to say and was choosing his words carefully. "I watched your boy in that cockpit. He loved it." He did. He didn't just love it. He understood it. Chen told me he asked about the angle of attack indicator. A 7-year-old asked about AOA. She almost fell off the ladder. He reads a lot. He does more than read. He absorbs, processes, asks the right questions in the right order. Marcus, that kid's mind works like yours. That terrifies me. It should inspire you. It does both. They turned a corner and Mitchell stopped, faced Marcus directly. "I'm going to be straight with you because that's what you always respected from me. And I'm not going to change now. You're wasting yourself. You know it. I know it. Those pilots back there know it. The kid knows it. I'm providing for my son." "You're providing a paycheck." "That's not the same thing. It keeps the lights on. And that's enough for you. Lights on, food in the fridge, bare minimum survival, because the Marcus Wade I knew didn't do bare minimum anything. The Marcus Wade you knew had a wife." Mitchell absorbed that, didn't flinch, let the weight of it settle before he spoke again. "Rachel wouldn't want this for you. Don't do that." "Don't do what?" "Don't tell me what my wife would want. You didn't know her the way I did." "You're right, I didn't. But I knew you, and I know what she saw in you, because everyone who ever met you saw it. You are built for something bigger than an oil change. Marcus, you have a mind that can process tactical scenarios faster than any computer the Air Force has ever built. You have instincts that saved lives, real lives, American lives. And you're using those instincts to diagnose check engine lights. Those check engine lights matter to the people who bring me their cars. I'm not saying they don't. I'm saying you can do both. You can be a mechanic and you can be a teacher. You can fix cars Monday through Wednesday and come down here Thursday and Friday and teach my pilots how to survive. Your pilots are fine. My pilots are good. Good isn't enough. Good gets you through training. Good doesn't get you through combat. What gets you through combat is the kind of thinking that doesn't exist in a manual. And the only man I've ever known who can teach that thinking is standing in front of me right now arguing about it instead of saying yes. Marcus rubbed the back of his neck. His muscles were tight. Everything was tight. 3 years of holding himself together through sheer stubbornness, and now this man, this colonel, this friend was pulling at the seams. If I say yes, what does that look like day to day? Because I can't uproot Tyler. He's got school. He's got friends. He's got a routine. Stability is the only thing I can give him that doesn't cost money. Fort Worth to here is an hour and 20 minutes. I'll arrange base housing for overnight stays. Tyler can come with you. We have a school on base for dependents. He can sit in on the youth program. Hell, I'll have Chen babysit him. She already volunteered. She did. Before you even left the flight line, told me, and I'm quoting directly, "Colonel, that kid is the best thing that's happened to this squadron in 2 years." She wasn't wrong. Marcus almost smiled. Tyler does have that effect on people. So does his father when his father lets people in. Mitchell pulled a business card from his flight suit pocket, plain white, blue lettering. Colonel Ryan Mitchell, 58th Fighter Squadron, phone number and email address. Call me, don't disappear again. I won't. Promise me. Marcus took the card, held it between his thumb and forefinger, and looked at it the way a man looks at a key that might open a door he's been standing outside of for 3 years. I promise. They walked back to the terminal together. Tyler was waiting near the boarding area with Cole. The young lieutenant had given the boy a squadron patch, the 58th Fighter Squadron emblem, a raptor silhouette against a red star. Tyler had pressed it against his jacket like it was a medal. "Dad, look what Lieutenant Cole gave me." "I see it. What do you say?" "Thank you, Lieutenant Cole." Cole crouched down to the boy's level. "Tyler, you keep studying those jets, okay? And you take care of your dad. He needs it more than he'll ever admit." "I know. He doesn't eat enough vegetables." Cole laughed. "That tracks." He stood and extended his hand to Marcus. "Sir, it was the honor of my career to meet you today. I mean that. Fly safe, Lieutenant, and name your jets. Budget reasons be damned." Cole grinned. "Yes, sir." Chen appeared and hugged Tyler without asking permission. The boy hugged back with both arms. She whispered something in his ear that Marcus couldn't hear, and Tyler nodded seriously. "What did she say?" Marcus asked after Chen stepped back. Tyler looked up. "She said my mom would be really proud of both of us." Marcus's jaw clenched. He nodded at Chen. She nodded back. No words needed. Torres was last. The old crew chief walked up and didn't shake Marcus's hand. He reached into his coverall pocket and pulled out a small metal object, a challenge coin worn smooth from years of being carried. On one side, the crest of the Nellis Maintenance Detachment. On the other, a phrase Marcus recognized immediately. "Keep them flying." Marcus read it aloud. "That's our motto. Maintenance crew. We don't get the glory. We don't get the medals. We keep the jets in the air so pilots like you can do what you do. I've carried that coin for 9 years. I want your boy to have it." "Torres, I can't take your coin." "You're not taking it. You're passing it on. That's what coins are for." Marcus took the coin and handed it to Tyler. The boy turned it over in his hands, feeling the weight of it. "What do I do with it?" "You keep it. And when you're having a bad day, you hold it. And you remember that a bunch of people in uniform thought you were pretty special." "Thank you, Sergeant Torres." "You're welcome, young man." The boarding call came again. Final call. Marcus took Tyler's hand, and they walked toward the gate. He turned once and looked back at the group of pilots and crew who had gathered to see them off. Mitchell stood at the center, arms crossed, watching with the expression of a man who had just set something in motion and knew it. Marcus raised his hand. A simple wave. Not a salute. Something more personal than that. Mitchell raised his hand in return. Then Marcus turned and walked through the gate. The jetway felt different this time. narrower somehow. Or maybe the world he was re-entering just felt smaller than the one he was leaving. They boarded the replacement aircraft and found their seats. Same arrangement. Window in middle row 3. The aisle seat was empty. Tyler buckled in and immediately pressed his face against the window, craning to see the flight line. "Dad, I can still see the Raptors from here." "Yeah. They look small from here." "Everything looks small from a distance." Passengers filed in around them. Different energy now. Less tension. The diversion had bonded them the way shared emergencies do. Turned strangers into people who nodded at each other with something approaching warmth. A man across the aisle leaned over. Maybe 60, gray-haired, wearing a veteran's cap. "That your boy?" "Yes, sir." "Saw what happened on the flight line, the salute. My buddy texted me a photo. Someone took a photo, son. Everyone took a photo. It's all over the base." The old crew chief said Viper 1 was in the building. "I served 22 years in the Navy and I know what that kind of respect means. Whatever you did to earn it, thank you." Marcus didn't know what to say. He nodded. The man nodded back and settled into his seat. Then Charlotte Pierce appeared. She stood at the end of the row the same way she had the first time, but everything about her was different. Her posture was different. Her face was different. The armor she'd worn like a second skin had cracked, and what was underneath looked raw and exposed and deeply uncomfortable. She looked at the aisle seat. She looked at Marcus. "Is this seat still mine?" Her voice was quiet. "It's all yours." She sat down. Didn't adjust her jacket to avoid touching him. Didn't pull out her laptop. Didn't build a wall. She sat and she folded her hands in her lap and she stared straight ahead at the seat in front of her. 30 seconds passed. A minute. Tyler was absorbed in the window. The flight attendants were doing their final checks. "Mr. Wade?" Marcus turned slightly. "Yes, ma'am." "I owe you something that I'm not very good at giving." Marcus waited. "I owe you an apology." "Okay." "I watched what happened out there on the flight line. I saw those pilots salute you. I saw your son in that cockpit. I heard people talking about missions and tactics and things I don't even understand. And I'm the senior vice president of a defense contractor. I sit in meetings about these aircraft. And I didn't know. I didn't know who you were. You didn't need to know who I was to treat us with decency." That landed. Charlotte's lips pressed together. She nodded slowly. "You're right. I didn't need to know. That's the whole point, isn't it?" "Yes, ma'am. That's the whole point. I was cruel to your son. I dismissed him. He showed me his toy and I shut him down. He's 7 years old, and I treated him like an inconvenience." "You did. I'm sorry. I'm genuinely sorry." Marcus turned to face her fully for the first time. He studied her the way he used to study threat assessments. Not with anger, not with satisfaction, with precision. "Mrs. Pierce, I appreciate the apology and I'll accept it on my own behalf. But the person you need to apologize to is sitting by the window holding a toy jet that his dead mother gave him." Charlotte flinched. The word dead hit her like a physical thing. Her eyes went glassy. "I didn't know." "You didn't ask." She was quiet for a long time. The engines started. The plane began to push back from the gate. The familiar sounds of departure filled the cabin. "Tyler." The boy turned from the window, looked at her with the guarded expression of a child who remembers being dismissed. "Hi. I was rude to you earlier when you showed me your jet. That was wrong of me, and I'm sorry." Tyler looked at her, didn't say anything for a few seconds. Then he held up the toy Raptor. "It's an F-22 Raptor. My mom gave it to me before she died. It can go Mach 2. That's 1,534 miles per hour." Charlotte looked at the toy. Really looked at it this time. The chipped paint, the missing landing gear, the tape holding one wing together. She saw it for what it was. Not a cheap toy. Not a distraction. A relic. A piece of a mother's love preserved in scratched plastic. "That's very fast. The fastest fighter jet in the world." My dad used to fly one. I know, I saw. Do you want to hold it? The question hung in the air. Charlotte looked at Marcus. He didn't give permission, didn't refuse it either. He just watched. She reached out and took the toy from Tyler's hand. She held it carefully. The way a person holds something they suddenly understand is priceless. It's light. It's made of plastic. The real one weighs 43,000 pounds. You know a lot about these? My dad taught me, and library books, and YouTube. Charlotte handed the toy back. Tyler took it and turned back to the window satisfied. The grudge, if a 7-year-old can hold one, had been released. Children forgive faster than adults. Not because they forget, because they haven't yet learned that holding on to anger feels powerful. They still know the truth that letting go is the stronger move. Charlotte leaned back in her seat. She didn't speak for a while. The plane taxied and took off. The base fell away below them. Marcus watched through the window over Tyler's shoulder as the Raptors on the flight line shrank to silver specks and then disappeared entirely. When they reached cruising altitude, Charlotte spoke again. "Can I tell you something, Mr. Wade?" "Go ahead." "I work in defense. I've been in the industry for 23 years. I've sat across the table from generals and admirals and secretaries of defense. I've negotiated contracts worth billions. And today, standing on that tarmac, watching a group of pilots salute a mechanic from Fort Worth, I realized something that 23 years in the industry never taught me." "What's that?" "That I don't know a damn thing about what matters." Marcus looked at her for the first time. He didn't see the armor. He didn't see the title. He didn't see the suit or the earrings or the leather bag. He saw a woman who had just been hit by something she couldn't negotiate her way out of. That's a hard thing to realize. It's humiliating. No. Humiliating is having your son's toy dismissed by a stranger on an airplane. Realizing you were wrong is just growth. Charlotte closed her eyes. A single tear tracked down her left cheek. She wiped it quickly. "I have a daughter. She's 19, goes to Stanford. I paid for the best schools, the best tutors, the best everything, but she doesn't call me. She hasn't called in 6 months. And today, watching your son look at you the way he does, I think I understand why." "Why?" "Because I gave her everything except what you give Tyler." "What do I give Tyler?" "Yourself." The words sat between them like something holy. Marcus didn't respond. There was nothing to respond with. She'd found her own truth, and it wasn't his to validate or deny. Tyler had fallen asleep against the window. The toy Raptor was tucked under his arm. The squadron patch was pressed between his hand and his chest. The challenge coin was in his jacket pocket. He slept the way only children sleep. Totally. Completely. Without reservation. Marcus reached over and adjusted the boy's seatbelt, brushed a strand of hair off his forehead, pulled the thin airline blanket up to his chin. Charlotte watched him do all of this. Every small, practiced, tender gesture. "He's lucky to have you." "I'm the lucky one." "You both are." Marcus leaned back in his seat and closed his eyes. His body was exhausted. 31 hours without sleep, a double shift, a diverted flight, an emotional earthquake on a military base, and now the steady hum of an aircraft carrying him toward Washington and whatever came next. But his mind wouldn't stop. Mitchell's offer circled through his thoughts like a fighter in a holding pattern. Part-time consulting. Teaching tactical awareness. Shaping the next generation of pilots. 2 days a week. Flexible schedule. Base housing for overnights. Tyler could come. Chen had volunteered to watch him. It was everything he wanted wrapped in everything he feared. Because saying yes meant going back. Not all the way back. Not into the cockpit. Not into combat. But back into the world that had defined him. The world he'd loved. The world he'd left. And going back meant feeling everything he'd spent 3 years burying. The pride. The loss. The identity crisis of a man who was born to fly and chose to stay on the ground. He reached into his pocket and pulled out Mitchell's business card, held it between his fingers in the dark of the cabin. felt the edges, read the number by memory even though he'd only looked at it once. 48 hours. That's what Mitchell had given him. 48 hours to decide if he was ready to be Viper 1 again, or at least some version of him. They landed in Washington at 9:47 at night. Tyler woke during the descent, blinking against the cabin lights, the toy raptor still tucked under his arm. He pressed his face against the window and watched the city lights spread out below them like a circuit board glowing in the dark. "Dad, is that the White House?" "I think that's a Walmart, bud." "Oh." The plane touched down smoothly. Passengers stood and reached for overhead bins and moved with the tired urgency of people at the end of a long day that had been longer than expected. Marcus waited. He always waited. Let others go first. Military habit. Civilian habit. Maybe just Marcus habit. Charlotte stood and pulled her bag from the overhead compartment. She paused beside their row. "Mr. Wade? Mrs. Pierce?" She opened her mouth closed, it opened it again. "I'd like to give you my card. Not for business, not for networking. I just think there are things I could learn from you. And if your son ever wants a tour of Sentinel Defense Technologies, where we build parts of the aircraft he loves so much, I'd like to arrange that." She held out a business card. Marcus looked at it. 2 business cards in one day. One from a colonel offering him a mission. One from the woman who had dismissed his son offering something that looked a lot like redemption. He took it. "Thank you. Thank you for not making this harder than it needed to be. You did the hard part. Apologizing takes more guts than most people think. Coming from a man who flew combat missions, I'll take that as a compliment." She walked away. Her heels clicked against the jetway floor and then she was gone, swallowed by the terminal crowd carrying something different than what she'd carried when she boarded. Marcus and Tyler made their way through the airport. The boy was dragging half asleep on his feet, his backpack bouncing against his legs. Marcus picked him up. Tyler wrapped his arms around his father's neck and rested his head against his shoulder. "Dad." "Yeah, buddy. Today was the best day of my life. Better than Disney World. We've never been to Disney World." "Right. I keep meaning to fix that. Today was better than Disney World would have been anyway." "How do you know?" "Because Disney World doesn't have real F-22s. Marcus smiled against the top of his son's head. "Can't argue with that logic." Helen Morrison was waiting at arrivals. Small woman with silver hair and Rachel's cheekbones and the kind of eyes that looked like they'd been doing too much crying and not enough sleeping for 3 years. She saw Marcus carrying Tyler, and her face did that thing it always did. A quick flash of grief followed by a forced smile, because every time she saw her grandson, she saw her daughter. "How was the flight?" "We got diverted to an Air Force base." "What?" "Engine issue. Everybody's fine. Tyler had the time of his life." "Grandma." Tyler lifted his head. "I sat in a real F-22, a real one, and pilots saluted Dad. And the lady was mean, but then she said sorry, and I got a patch and a coin, and Captain Chen showed me the heads-up display." Helen looked at Marcus over the boy's head. Her eyes were wide. "I'll explain later." They drove to Helen's house in Arlington. It was a modest place. 2-bedroom colonial on a quiet street where the neighbors kept their lawns trimmed and their opinions to themselves. Rachel had grown up here. Her bedroom was still upstairs exactly as she'd left it when she went to college. Helen couldn't change it. Marcus understood that. He had a box of Rachel's clothes in his closet in Fort Worth that he couldn't open either. Tyler was asleep before they pulled into the driveway. Marcus carried him inside and laid him on the guest bed, pulled off the boy's shoes and covered him with the quilt Helen kept folded at the foot of the bed. The toy raptor went on the pillow beside him. The squadron patch went on the nightstand. The challenge coin stayed in his jacket pocket. Marcus stood in the doorway and watched his son sleep. He did this every night at home. It was the only time the world was completely quiet and completely safe. In those moments watching Tyler breathe, Marcus could convince himself that he was doing enough, that mac and cheese and packed lunches and bedtime stories were enough, that showing up was enough. But tonight the math felt different. Tonight he'd stood on a flight line and remembered who he was. He went downstairs. Helen had made tea. She set a cup on the kitchen table and sat across from him. "Tell me." So he told her. All of it. The executive on the plane, the diversion, the pilots, the salute, Mitchell, the consulting offer, everything he'd carried off that tarmac and onto the next plane and through the airport and into this kitchen. Helen listened without interrupting. When he finished, she wrapped both hands around her cup and was quiet for a long time. "Rachel would tell you to take it. I know. She used to say you were the best version of yourself when you were flying, not because you loved the speed or the danger, because you loved the purpose. I have purpose. Tyler is my purpose. Tyler is your reason. Purpose is different. Reason is why you get up. Purpose is why you feel alive when you do." Marcus stared at his tea. It was getting cold. He hadn't taken a sip. "Helen, I'm scared." She reached across the table and put her hand on his. It was the first time he'd admitted that to anyone. Not to Mitchell. Not to the pilots. Not to himself. He'd said it to his dead wife's mother in a kitchen in Arlington at 11 o'clock at night, and the words hung in the air like a confession. "What are you scared of?" "That I'll go back and I won't be good enough anymore. That 3 years of oil changes rusted whatever I used to have. That I'll stand in front of those young pilots and they'll see a mechanic pretending to be something he used to be." "Marcus." "Yeah. You sat in a commercial aircraft today and diagnosed an engine problem from your seat. You told a woman the exact time you'd land and you were off by 18 seconds. You corrected an official military debrief from memory. 3 years didn't rust anything. You just covered it up." He looked at her. This woman who had every reason to resent him because he was alive and her daughter wasn't. Because he'd taken Rachel away from Arlington and into a military life that was all deployments and relocations and lonely nights. Because in the end he was the one who stayed and Rachel was the one who left. But Helen had never resented him. Not once. Not even on the worst days. "You sound like your daughter." "Where do you think she got it?" He almost smiled. "What about Tyler? I take this job even part-time. It means time away from him. Base visits, overnights. He's already lost his mother. I can't ask him to share his father." "You're not asking him to share you. You're asking him to watch you become whole again. Children don't need a parent who sacrifices everything. They need a parent who shows them what it looks like to live. When did you get so wise?" "I raised Rachel. That was a full education." Marcus picked up his tea and finally drank. It was cold. He didn't care. "I'm going to call Mitchell tomorrow." "Good." "I'm going to say yes." "Good." "I'm terrified." "Also good." "Courage isn't the absence of fear, Marcus. You know that better than anyone alive." He finished his tea and said good night. Went upstairs and checked on Tyler one more time. The boy had rolled onto his side, one arm flung across the pillow, the toy raptor wedged between his cheek and the pillowcase. His breathing was slow and deep and perfect. Marcus sat on the edge of the bed, pulled out Mitchell's business card and Charlotte's business card, and laid them both on the nightstand next to the squadron patch. 3 pieces of paper that represented 3 different things. A mission, a lesson, a bridge. He slept that night for the first time in weeks without dreaming about Rachel's hospital room. The next morning Tyler was up before him. The boy was sitting on the living room floor in his pajamas, the toy raptor in one hand and the challenge coin in the other, arranging them on the carpet in some configuration that only made sense to a 7-year-old military tactician. "Morning, Dad." "Morning. You're up early." "I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the jets." Marcus sat down on the floor beside him. His knees cracked. His back was stiff. "Tyler, I need to talk to you about something." "Okay." "You know Colonel Mitchell, the man at the base who's in charge of everything?" "Yeah. He offered me a job, at the base, part-time, 2 or 3 days a week. I'd teach young pilots, help them learn things about flying that they can't get from books." Tyler's eyes lit up. "At the base?" Yeah, and they have a school on base. And Captain Chen said she'd look after you when I'm teaching. Captain Chen is awesome. She seems pretty awesome, yeah. Tyler was quiet for a moment. He turned the challenge coin over in his hand. Dad, would you be happy? The question was so simple and so enormous that Marcus had to take a breath before answering. Yeah, bud, I think I would be. Then why are you asking me? Just say yes. Because your opinion matters more than anyone's. Tyler looked at his father with those gray-green eyes, Rachel's eyes, and then he said something that Marcus would remember for the rest of his life. Dad, when we were at the base, you stood up tall. You laughed. You talked to people like you weren't tired. You were different. You were the way you are in the pictures Mom kept, the ones where you're wearing the flight suit and smiling. I want that, Dad, the one who smiles. Marcus's vision blurred. He reached for his son and pulled him close. The boy pressed against his chest, warm and small and solid and real. I'm going to call him. Right now. Right now. He pulled out his phone, pulled out the business card, dialed. 3 rings. Mitchell? Colonel, it's Marcus Wade. A pause. Then Mitchell's voice carrying the weight of a grin Marcus could hear through the phone. That was fast. I gave you 48 hours. I didn't need 48 hours. Marcus looked at Tyler. The boy was watching him with everything he had. Hope and pride and love and a 7-year-old's unshakable faith that his father could do anything. I'm in. Mitchell exhaled. Welcome back, Viper 1. I'm not Viper 1 anymore, Colonel. The hell you're not. Report to base next Thursday, 800. Wear something without grease on it. No promises. Mitchell laughed. I'll have the paperwork ready. And Marcus. Yeah. It's good to have you back, son. It's good to be back, sir. He hung up. Tyler was bouncing on his knees. What did he say? He said, welcome back. Are you going Thursday? First trip, no. I need to get settled. After that, yes. Promise? Promise. Tyler threw his arms around his father's neck so hard they both fell backward onto the carpet. The toy raptor dug into Marcus's shoulder blade, and the challenge coin pressed into his ribs, and his son was laughing. Really laughing. The kind of laughter that fills a room and doesn't apologize for itself. Helen appeared in the doorway holding a coffee mug. Her eyes were wet. You called him. I called him. Rachel is smiling right now. Wherever she is, she's smiling. Marcus lay on the carpet with his son on his chest and stared at the ceiling. He thought about Rachel, about the way she used to stand in the kitchen doorway when he came home from a deployment, arms crossed, trying to look angry, failing completely because her smile always gave her away. He thought about Tyler in that cockpit looking down at him with an expression of pure pride. He thought about the salute in the hallway. 23 hands raised to their foreheads for a man in a faded jacket. He thought about Charlotte lowering her head on the tarmac and a crew chief named Torres handing his most prized possession to a 7-year-old stranger. He thought about Mitchell saying, "Welcome back," with a voice that cracked on the second word. And he thought about his own hands, greased, scarred, calloused hands that fixed engines and packed lunches and held his dying wife and carried his sleeping son and saluted without thinking. Because some things live so deep in your body that 3 years on the ground can't reach them. Those hands would hold a flight manual again. They would point to a tactical display. They would grip a young pilot's shoulder and say, "Here's what they don't teach you." They would still change oil. They would still pack lunches. They would still carry Tyler when the boy was too tired to walk. They would do all of it. Because that's what hands are for. Not one thing. Everything. That afternoon, Daniel and Tyler took the metro into the city. Helen had given them directions to the Air and Space Museum because Tyler had been begging to go for 2 years, and Marcus had always said someday, in the way parents say someday when they mean, I can't afford it right now. But the museum was free. He'd checked twice. They walked through the main hall, and Tyler moved from exhibit to exhibit with the focus of a doctoral student reading every placard, studying every aircraft, asking questions that Marcus answered with the quiet authority of a man who had lived what these displays could only describe. They stopped at the fighter jet exhibit. An F-22 Raptor model hung from the ceiling on cables frozen in a climbing turn. Tyler held up his toy and compared them. Same jet. Same jet. Dad. Yeah. Are you important? Marcus looked at his son. This small, brilliant, stubborn, beautiful boy who had his mother's eyes and his father's focus and a toy jet held together with tape and love and the last breath of a woman who knew she was leaving but wanted to leave something behind that her son could hold. I'm important to you. That's the most important kind. Tyler thought about this. And now you're important to the pilots too. I suppose I am. And to Colonel Mitchell. And Captain Chen probably, and Lieutenant Cole, and Sergeant Torres, and to the lady on the plane, and to Grandma, and to Mrs. Ramirez whose car you fixed, and to Mr. Tran, and to me, especially to me. Marcus crouched down so he was eye level with his son. He put both hands on the boy's shoulders, those grease-stained, scarred, calloused hands that the world kept judging and his son kept holding. Tyler, listen to me. Everything I did in the Air Force, every mission, every flight, every time I strapped into that jet and went into the sky, none of it compares to this. None of it compares to standing in a museum with you talking about airplanes, knowing that I get to take you home and make you dinner and help you with your homework and tuck you in tonight. That's the mission. You are the mission. You always were. Tyler nodded, serious, certain, 7 years old and made of steel. I know, Dad, but it's okay to have two missions. Marcus pulled his son into a hug right there in the middle of the Air and Space Museum, surrounded by tourists and school groups and the ghosts of every pilot who ever traded Earth for sky. He held on tight, and for the first time in 3 years when he let go, he didn't feel like he was losing something. He felt like he was beginning. They walked out of the museum into the late afternoon sun. Tyler ran ahead, holding the toy Raptor above his head, banking it left and right, making engine sounds that echoed off the marble steps. Marcus watched his son and felt something settle in his chest. Not grief, not relief, something deeper and quieter and more permanent than either. He reached into his pocket and touched the challenge coin Torres had given Tyler. The boy had handed it to Marcus for safekeeping, the way children hand their treasures to their parents because they know without question, without doubt, that their parents will keep them safe. Marcus closed his fingers around the coin and held it tight. Keep them flying. That had been Torres's motto, the maintenance crew's creed. Keep the jets in the air. Keep the pilots safe. Keep the mission going. Marcus had a new version now. Keep your son laughing. Keep your hands working. Keep showing up. Keep standing tall even when the world tells you to sit down. Keep honoring the woman who loved you by raising the boy she left behind. Keep saying yes to the life that's waiting for you, even when you're terrified, especially when you're terrified. Keep flying, not in a cockpit, not at Mach 2, not at 40,000 feet, but keep flying. Tyler turned around at the bottom of the steps, grinning, the toy Raptor catching the sunlight. Come on, Dad. Marcus waved mechanic Father Viper. One walked down the steps toward his son. His hands were still dirty. He didn't wash them. They were proof that he showed up. And showing up every single day for the people who needed him, whether they wore flight suits or school uniforms, whether they sat in cockpits or kitchen chairs, whether they saluted him or just held his hand when the world got scary, that was the only mission that ever truly mattered. Marcus Wade was not a broken man who used to fly. He was a father who never stopped.